Hi everyone, welcome to the MrpTech podcast. This is episode 101. My name is Matt, and this is the weekly podcast discussing everyday tech for everyday people. And in today's episode, we have a really great show for you today. This is a show that I've been looking forward to for about a week and a half now. I have a very special guest with us. Daniel Ray from the MuseScore project is here today to talk about the project that I am very passionate about. So without any further ado, I just want to introduce Daniel Ray. Daniel, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Great to be here.
I am very excited about MuseScore, and this show couldn't have been any more well-timed because over the last few weeks, I've been using MuseScore on and off for the last few years, and for the last couple months now, I wanted to get a little bit more in depth with MuseScore because I'm sort of an open source advocate on most of the things that I talk about, and I've been using MuseScore on and off for quite a while, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I saw a post that you made on Facebook on one of the music teacher pages, and talking about the MuseScore beta that's coming out. But let's talk a little bit about MuseScore itself. What is MuseScore, and what is it for?
So, MuseScore as a company, it's the creator of a free open source music notation software. And this notation software is paired with an online community of more than 12 million monthly active users.
That's awesome. I mean, MuseScore is huge. It's used all over the place. So what is it that you do within MuseScore?
It's actually a good question. To explain what I mean by that is kind of to back up and talk a little bit about what has been happening with MuseScore and how this has kind of influenced the approach going forward, and that'll kind of tell you a little bit about what my role is. And so MuseScore as a company now is part of Ultimate Guitar. So Ultimate Guitar recently acquired MuseScore. And for those of you who might not be familiar with UG, it is the largest online community for musicians with over 100 million unique visitors per month and millions of titles in their catalog. And so UG's been around for quite a while, since 1998. And so it's something, let's say, of a grandfather in this music space on the internet. And so during this time, what's really interesting about UG is that they've developed this really unique approach to their operations and their management. It's a very, very flat company, no hierarchy. There's not really any titles and a lot of flexibility in what you do as a company. And this is really kind of moving over into the approach moving forward with MuseScore. And how it works is basically in the company, they bring a great number of really talented, experienced people into the company. And they look at the challenges, they look at the ideas, and look at ways to approach it, what needs to be solved, and kind of prioritizes them. And internally in the company, pitch projects, things that they know could or should be done, and move forward in there. And so kind of taking on areas, and my areas that I'm very, very passionate and very interested in with MuseScore are in the areas of music education. And that's kind of where ultimately I will be focusing a lot of my efforts. But initially, the things that we're working on is kind of how to improve the software to lay the groundwork for some of those things. And I'll talk a little bit later about a couple of things that we're working on that in the upcoming releases that will support some of that.
That's really great. When did Ultimate Guitar take over MuseScore? I really I guess I haven't really followed a whole lot and
yeah, we made the announcement earlier. This was earlier in the spring. We made the announcement, but this has been in the works for some time, since the last let's say autumn.
You were working with with Ultimate Guitar before you were at MuseScore. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm at MuseScore. There is a team, not from Ultimate Guitar, but Ultimate Guitar has brought them in. So now creating their dedicated team for MuseScore, but
Gotcha.
Originally coming in since the acquisition.
And so where is MuseScore located? Where is sort of the headquarters?
So currently, where I'm at right now, we're working out of the MuseScore offices in Kaliningrad, Russia. We are opening up another office soon in St. Petersburg, Russia. Mm-hmm. And you'll see there probably some additions to the team in areas of engineering and marketing and so on. And we'll continue to grow the company and the efforts as needed and where needed. And so a lot of the efforts that are being focused on right now are on some of the engineering types of things and some of these, like the behind the scenes kinds of things.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that MuseScore is seeing some success and that it's partnering with other companies and growing and moving on to new locations. That's always great to hear. Before we dive deep into MuseScore, let's just talk a little bit about you personally and how you got started with all of this. You must have had some sort of interest with tech and music combined.
Yeah. How I got involved in all of that and kind of what my background is I mean, I grew up in both music and in technology. From the music side, I got started just the same as pretty much any other kid in America would come from. And by the way, even though I'm here in Russia, I live in Russia. I'm in the team here in Russia, but I did grow up in the U.S. And so the same as anybody else there in the U.S., got involved in music through the schools, the public schools. And I was very, very fortunate to grow up in an area that had really great music education program. On the technology side, I grew up, again, in a family that was very much involved in technology. My grandfather was at Bell Labs, so he was doing some of the very, very early work in computers in the 1950s, 1960s. And my father was also an early pioneer in computer science. So he was at Digital Equipment Corporation in Massachusetts, and then moved to WordPerfect, and then to Oracle, and so on. So he was also very early involved in computer science. And as a result, the same way you'd have a kid practice piano, I was coding at an early age. And it was not until much later that those things ended up kind of merging into one thing, being able to apply those into other things. And so for my music education background, I ended up studying music education. I studied music education at Fresno State University in California, and then later went on to study composition at Juilliard in New York.
Wow, that's really great.
Yeah, I was involved in as a performer. I did a bunch of stuff. There's a kind of a wide range of things, ranging from drum and bugle corps. I was involved in a drum and bugle corps in California, the Blue Devils.
Oh, wow.
And I was a drum major there for a couple of years, and then went on to teach in drum corps, and then was a bassoonist as well, kind of professionally, for a couple of years. So I played.
Wow. So you're pretty well rounded then. I was going to ask you what instrument you played, but you sort of answered that question.
Answered that question, yeah. So I played 2 seasons with Fresno Philharmonic.
That's awesome.
On bassoon,
really,
and then
really cool.
Yeah, contrabassoon. I subbed for a year with San Francisco Symphony. So.
Wow. So you've been around quite a bit in the music industry, and how cool is that your relatives were sort of the pioneers back in the day, technology wise. And it's really interesting you sort of touched on it a little bit, that we as musicians, we always we spend hours and hours in a practice room, but the same thing developing the skills as far as coding, it's almost the same type of practice that you need. So that's really cool. I guess I never even put 2 and 2 together before, but anytime you're developing a new skill or interested in a new hobby, you got to put the time in to learn everything. So that's really, really awesome. Okay, so let's just jump into MuseScore a little bit. MuseScore, for me personally, I've always used it in the way that if I need to take a small project, I need to write something out for a student, or if I need to write a part out and convert it from, let's say, French horn to a trombone part, or something similar to that. One of the things that I do, I jump on MuseScore because it's really easy. The interface is so easy, and it's pretty crazy how it doesn't, just like anything, it has a learning curve. But once you understand that and you get over that process, MuseScore is so easy to use, and it's so beneficial. And if I have a student who has any interest at all in composition, the very first thing that I do is tell them to go download MuseScore, because most students, or even college students, or even professionals, they may not have the money to dish out for the really expensive products that are out there, and MuseScore does a lot in itself, in its professional quality. And the comparison that I would make is very similar to, say, Photoshop versus GIMP. GIMP is the open source project, and Photoshop, everybody is so their thought automatically goes to Photoshop when GIMP does absolutely just about everything that Photoshop does, and it's free and open source. So let's talk. So I kind of just giving you a heads up of why MuseScore is so important to me as an educator. Why is MuseScore important to you?
Well, really, this gets to the core of why is music education important to me, and there's a whole bunch of passionate reasons why that is, and I think that music education has the opportunity to really influence a lot of areas. We see studies that students that are involved in music education are doing better in their studies, they're doing better in their math, in their science, in their critical thought. So music education as a foundation for education is also very important. But when we back up here, the very, very foundation of music education is really the ability to read and write and share musical ideas. And that's really in the form of music notation. This ability, until now, has really been controlled by software companies and publishers that have priced access out of reach of large segments of the population. Some of these software vendors, it's several $100s. On the publishing side, there are works for a concert band or something like that that is hundreds of dollars to purchase a piece, and that kind of prices some of these schools and these programs out of this and really creating a sort of strata for all this. And so this, let's say this barrier here has kind of put access to music education out of reach of, again, large segments of the population and really limited their growth. And so with MuseScore, I think that we're really removing some of these barriers and making these tools and resources more freely available, and music making really more available to a much wider audience.
I couldn't agree with you more on that topic, because these price ranges that you talk about, and lots goes into development, and I we're all familiar in the tech industry with you got to pay developers have families, and these larger companies, they probably have to pay insurance for these guys, and that bumps the price, the cost, and it just skyrockets in that price range of $700 to $1,000 for a piece of software has always not sit well with me. And then that leaves the alternative of the road we don't want to go down is pirating software. And I've never myself wanted to do that at all. And so that's where I sort of got into the free and open source alternatives, where you can legally download this software for free, and it's the equivalent. It's just as good, if not better in many respects, than that really expensive software. And even as an educator, that the educator discount for this software, it's still $300 as compared to $700, and it's still out of many people's grasp and money that we probably don't need to spend and that type of thing. So I completely cannot agree with you more. And that's really cool. And anytime I see a project like this that comes along and tries to remove those barriers to give access to anybody out there, I just have the highest respect for it, because music is an art form, and it should be able to be created in any way that we can. And so as artists, we want to be able to, most artists, we're not rich. We can't shell out that money. And so to be able to create that art, I think is the highest of importance, especially in this time. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And this also brings up another point, speaking about the artists and the artists being able to support themselves. This is another thing that's very important for us in MuseScore moving forward, is creating means for these creators to be able to support themselves. And so when we're talking before, you have these pieces out there priced very high for some of these schools to not be able to afford them. Well, that's because of the way that the publishing industry traditionally has been, where there's all these different layers involved and the mechanics of it, where the risk is, like, if you're a publisher, you're printing thousands and thousands of copies of something, then you're sitting on it and sending it to a distributor that sends it to a retailer. And so they're pricing in also their risk and all kinds of other things into that. And so who's getting the least amount of money, and when we look at it, is the actual creator, the composer. And absolutely, we want to be able to basically create some innovations in that area that's going to collapse things and make sure that the composers and the rights holders are getting paid. And this is actually one area where UG is bringing in some of their relationships and their expertise and so on. I mean, they've been working with publishers for a number of years and have really great relationships. And so, as you see, there's music that's freely available in MuseScore when you go to MuseScore.com. That doesn't necessarily mean that the publishers are not getting paid, which means the composers or creators are also getting paid. So there is a period here now, and we've worked on these relationships, and we'll continue to work on these relationships with publishers moving forward, to where the rights holders and the creators, MuseScore will be an outlet for them to be able to continue to support their living. And so I think as we move forward, particularly in education's a little bit different in that ecosystem, that there are now a large number of niche publishers or independent composers and arrangers. Particularly when you get into segments like marching band and so on, there's a lot of independent composers. And so we want to continue to explore ways that are going to allow these composers to really make a great living. So that's another important aspect of it. And so I don't want people to look at MuseScore and think of it as a piracy site when they see some of these things there, because that's really not the case.
Let me, I want to tell you a story that just happened this week, and it was before we had even gotten in touch with each other. Anytime that I have a student who is remotely interested in music outside of what we do in the classroom, I will find any resource that I can for them. And our concerts were a little earlier this year than they normally are. Our schedule was kind of bumped early, about a week early. And so we were kind of finishing up here at the school that I work in. And this year we've rolled out Chromebooks to all of our students. And so we were kind of straightening up the room after the concert. And I had a few students who had their Chromebooks out, and they were really big into these Korean pop bands that are coming out. And they wanted to know where they could find music for it, to find out, where they could find notated rhythms and that type of thing for their favorite songs. And so I said, well, why don't you go on and just try to Google it and see what you can come up with, and we'll see what we can do. And the next thing I know, they're actually on the MuseScore website, and they found piano scores with their favorite artists, and they're sitting at the piano plunking away keys, trying to figure out, trying to read the piano music. This was a French horn player and a clarinet player, and they're playing, and that was the coolest thing to me. And so when they were actually able to find that music on the MuseScore website, it was sort of like the light bulb went off, and I was like, I understand where they're headed with this project. And that was really cool. And then on top of that, I said, hey, MuseScore, not only do they have this music online, but you can go home and put this on your computer and you can write your own music. And then their eyes just got really big. I can do that, and that was super cool. And so we appreciate as music educators, we appreciate having those options available to us online, because you're right, it's not pirate. Most of the stuff is in public domain at this point in time. So
some of it is, but I mean, when you look at, for example, the K-pop artists, those are most likely belonging to some publishing company that we have a relationship with, to where that's available legally. And with things that are published on MuseScore, that there might be an issue with the rights holder, we do have a mechanism in place, an entire team in place, where they can get a request. And what we do is anything that gets taken down from there, then that just is a trigger for us to be able to go and try to create a relationship to get that licensed.
That is really incredible that you guys are taking the time to do that. Licensing, I'm sure, is a big deal, and especially in the music world, and just creating those partnerships rather than just taking it down and leaving it down, or the exact opposite, leaving it up and causing more problems, but actually taking the time and licensing things. I think that's great that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and again, it's important that we need to make sure that we're supporting that. But one thing I wanted to talk about, let's say you were talking about the idea of when your students, they found this piano score, so they're going in and trying to plunk it out on the piano. Well, if they're a French horn player or a clarinet player, they can download it into the MuseScore software and immediately transpose it into whatever instrument it is that they are most comfortable in, or rearrange it, or do kind of whatever they want. But the idea, and this goes back to accessibility, any piece that's out there that's on MuseScore.com, I can download into the MuseScore software, transpose or adjust in the way that is more accessible. And this also goes to education, where an educator can come and look at how they could maybe simplify a part to make it more playable.
and had I had a little bit more time with them, because actually it was at the end of our period, and had I had 5 more minutes with them, I would have shown, hey, you can transpose this to your part. And that was actually the last class that I had with them for the year. But so in the back of my mind, my mind is working on ways next year that we can incorporate this and get them to do that themselves. Let's take a step backwards now, and let's talk about where MuseScore came from.
Sure.
Because a lot of people don't know the history behind MuseScore. And so where did it come from?
An amazing founding team. I mean, it was an amazing founding team. So the genesis of MuseScore is a project which was the Muse Sequencer project. Started some years ago by Werner Schwier, one of the founders of MuseScore. And so Werner, he saw the lack of the really compelling and affordable music notation software that was easy to use, that met a lot of the criteria that people needed in a software. So he took the foundation of what he had done with Muse and forked it into what became the foundation of MuseScore.
Did it just start with him, or were there several developers starting out?
So he started it initially, and what ended up happening as soon as he kind of put it out there were several other people that were really kind of in the same, it's that same frequency, that same mindset at the same time. And 2 of those guys were Thomas Bonte and Nicolas Fromont. And so Werner was in Germany, Thomas was in Belgium, and Nicolas was in France. But they had all kind of met and connected together through some open source conferences, and so they had a relationship, and they dove in and started to really get behind this project. So Thomas, he got involved in supporting the project, developing the MuseScore.org site for developers, and Nicolas, he got very involved in organizing the community development effort, and all this led to the eventual formation of a company and the creation of MuseScore.com, where you could take the great creations you're creating inside of MuseScore and be able to publish them and share that sheet music with the world. And so that's the foundation, and they grew that to really where they were just months ago. And it's a pretty incredible story and an amazing thing that these guys have done.
Yeah, and I always like to, whenever I'm trying to learn about something, I always I always take it from where it is at the present and want to know where it came from in the past. And it usually has to do with somebody's passion and somebody's trying to create something that wasn't created before. So that's why I wanted to ask that question about the project. Do you know what programming language they used originally to write MuseScore?
Originally, I'm not sure, but I can tell you what it is now and what it's been since I think about 2008. By the way, starting originally, it was on Linux. It was available only on Linux, and then moved from there. So about 2008, I believe, is when they switched over to C++, and then started to use something called Qt for cross-platform development. So that's why it's available now on Linux, Windows, Mac OS, and a number of different versions.
I love the idea of cross-platform. I tend to be, I jump around quite a bit. At school, it's mostly Windows, and being a musician, it's most of the really great software is available for Mac, but also as a techie in me, Linux is something that I use quite a bit too. So I tend to gravitate towards cross-platform applications, and especially the ones that are open source. And so why did MuseScore choose to go the open source route rather than a commercial setting?
Sure. And by the way, if I could touch on one thing before jumping into this, because you brought up something before here with the Chromebooks.
Yep.
A lot of companies, a lot of vendors they're not really supporting the Linux market because they think it's a little too techy, or they don't understand that there's the opportunities there, and it's a challenge. It's a unique challenge to be able to port to all versions. And so
Absolutely. What
is interesting here is there will be some updates coming with Chromebook that will make the Linux version of MuseScore be available on Chromebook.
Really?
Yes.
That's really exciting news. That was one of the questions
Very
I was going to ask. Because I know with Chromebooks and I've sort of experimented. I've run Linux on Chromebooks. I've ripped out the developer screw and I put it in developer mode and enabled USB boot and installed Linux on them. And I also tried Crouton, but the Chromebooks being pretty low spec, not a lot of RAM, Crouton never really worked well for me.
Right.
But you could install Linux software that way. But and I know that they're talking about running Android apps now on Chromebooks eventually, and I had heard recently that Linux apps were going to work on Chromebooks as well. So that's really exciting.
It's very exciting. Yeah, this thing that should be also working on some new versions of Chromebooks. So there is the Pixelbook. If you go out and get the Pixelbook, the Linux version of MuseScore should be able to run on the Pixelbook. But the plan is, as I understand the roadmap, is that the same functionality and new updates should be rolled out to legacy versions of Chromebook.
That would be really great.
Yeah. So this goes back to tying this back into what, the question you asked here about why is MuseScore open source. The founding team has a strong foundation in open source, and it's the ability to be able to accomplish so much with such limited resources can only be accomplished in the open source community. It's pretty amazing that what they've been able to grow and to scale to, and it's not the founding team, it's the founding team, but as well the really great and generous contributors in the open source community that have contributed to the MuseScore project, which has allowed it to be able to do these types of things.
And that's what it's all about for me, too. That's the whole reason I do this show. That's the reason why I'm interested in Linux and open source software, is that community aspect of it, and how, if anybody has an idea, they can submit it to a project, or they can write the code themselves and submit it and see if it adds to a project. And I think just the fact that MuseScore chose the open source route is I'm super happy that we have this available. Just as an educator, it just makes life so much easier. And especially this with the changes being made to Chromebook. Most schools they're rolling out computers to all their students because they have to. State regulations. We're keeping up with the times, but they also don't have a lot of money to give them higher powered devices. So the Chromebooks, that's why everybody's jumping on them, and to be able to have that option to install a real piece of software rather than a web app on a Chromebook. That's I couldn't be happier that you said that. So we've talked a little bit about that, and let's say we've got some students who listen to this show, or other music educators. Is there any type of support system where users can contact MuseScore to get questions answered?
Absolutely. I mean, again, going back to this idea that there's 12 million other users of MuseScore. So if you are a new user of MuseScore and it's very new to you, there are 12 million other people who it's not new to. And the great thing about the community here is that they are very supportive of each other, and a lot of questions that you might have as a new user, a lot of times have already been asked. And so the two great resources to go to are both on MuseScore.org. So if you go to MuseScore.org and have a question about pretty much anything, in the support forums you can just simply ask, and there will be others in the community that will be able to answer that question. If they do not, then the MuseScore dev team and support team would also be able to answer this. And this is another point, is that with UG acquisition of MuseScore, now we're building up a dedicated support team for MuseScore. The second place is the MuseScore Handbook. The MuseScore Handbook walks you through every little step of how to use the software.
And I was taking a look at that. This weekend, and I have to tell you that the MuseScore Handbook is where to go if you want any help at all with MuseScore, because every question that I had was in there, and it's organized and it's well thought out. And we always forget about the people that do the documentation, and there's a lot that goes into documentation.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic resource, and I should also mention that there is also a book called Mastering MuseScore, written by Mark Sabatella. It's available on Amazon. It's available, if you go to MuseScore.org, there should be a link right there. It's a great book. If you want to use MuseScore, for example, in a classroom environment, this is a great book for a textbook.
And what was the name of the book again?
Mastering MuseScore.
Okay, I did see it on Amazon. I was going to pick it up, and I haven't yet, but I probably will. We've talked a lot about the current mission for MuseScore. Let's get into some of the details of what MuseScore actually does. basically, one of the things that is sort of touted is the what you see is what you get interface, and let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this approach is actually, I think, a little bit unique to MuseScore, and kind of sets it apart from some of the other software solutions out there. In that some of the other solutions, they separate the notation input from the engraving process. And MuseScore puts these two things together for two reasons. One, the idea of being able to see what it is on the page and being able to adjust it right there, and having that be a consistent thing. We're used to that in word processing, in any other software that we use. WYSIWYG is what people are used to. So separating those two things, especially for new users, I think is a little bit complicated. The second reason for this is that music notation, where we're going and where we're moving in this in the future, is not really only about paper. And so you want to have the ability to control how that's viewed and how that's displayed consistently across devices. So when you have the ability to adjust in the interface, to adjust the way the engraving looks, the way that things are displayed on paper, then you post it to MuseScore.com, it's going to look exactly the same way.
And just the thought behind that is really incredible, because we are moving to a more digital age, and people are using digital, music readers or tablets to read music, and so let me give you an example of what I use professionally. Professionally, I run a big band, a local big band made up of music teachers, and I'm the music director. I founded the group, but so I'm always organizing music, and every once in a while I'll write a chart myself. And in the back of my mind recently, I've always wanted to step away from the other software that I'm using and really dive deep into MuseScore and make a professional quality, open source, big band chart. And one of the things that I've noticed is that MuseScore supports Music XML, which means I can take those files from those other, pieces of software, and I can import them into MuseScore. And I just want to say that I took some of my own arrangements, and I tried this over the weekend, and it was pretty much flawless. It transferred everything, all the dynamic markings, all the accent markings, the rhythms were all placed correctly onto the right instrument tracks. And there may have been some tweaking that I had to do, like transposing certain instruments, but having that ability for Music XML is pretty awesome. And is there anything you want to add to that ability?
Yeah, well, there's 2 points I want to add. The first point is here that with MuseScore 2.3. we have introduced support for Music XML 3.1. That improves the interoperability between existing software applications that support the same in both directions. So the idea of being able to have something that was created in Sibelius or Finale, migrating to MuseScore, you have the ability to import those files and then continue to work with them.
So basically what you would do is you would export in those software, you would export as a Music XML file. It would be a new file that was saved, and then you could open that file in MuseScore. That's how you would do it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And there's also a large number of resources online in Music XML files.
Okay.
One thing that comes to mind, immediately, there was a project that was out there when you're talking about jazz specifically, of about 6,000 lead sheets in Music XML format that could be easily imported into MuseScore, and then being able to be extended and so on, to be able to support the jazz community. And the cool thing about these lead sheets, so what the great thing you can do is bring them into MuseScore and be able to mute some parts and play back. So almost like the old Jamie Aebersold. Or some of these other things. So it's great for a music student to be able to see the these lead sheets, to be able to play along with them, and to be able to analyze them and understand the actual structure.
I'm going to have to check that out, because we often hold jam sessions for high school students with our professional group, and making lead sheets is something that I really want to do for them. Just a quick question from the chat room, since we're on the topic of jazz. We have a music teacher who's in the chat room, and he says, currently off topic, but is there any plans to introduce jazz style notation? He said, I create parts for a non-traditional instruments in my ensemble, and it would be cool for their parts to look similar to their traditional instrument playing counterparts. So he's looking for jazz style.
Well, I'm going to tell you about Muse Jazz, the new font. So in MuseScore 2.2 and upcoming 2.3, you will see in terms of the text, you'll see the Muse Jazz text, which is, it's going to give you the text display. It looks like the old real book, old fake books in the text. Now in 3.0, MuseScore 3.0, which we're hoping to come out before the end of the year, introduces Muse Jazz as a notation font, which is going to give you that same look of these old fake books that you're looking for. So that's the cool thing is you can get a preview of that right now. You can go, if you go to musescore.org and go to downloads, and then if you scroll down to the pre-release or unsupported versions, you can actually get a nightly development version of this, and you can check it out and use it right now.
That's awesome. I think you made this is the new Plaid in the chat room. I think you made him pretty happy because he seems pretty excited. So that's awesome.
It's a really cool thing, and you know, an important thing here is, while music is a very broad, very very broad thing, there are so many small little niches or micro communities. It's very important to us moving forward that we listen to these communities and look at ways that we can support them, you know, rather than just trying to be broad-based.
And it's got to be tough to meet the demands of all those small groups out there that want it their way, you know. I can imagine it's a balancing act.
But the great thing is again, this comes back to the open source community and being very vibrant and very passionate. There are a lot of people within this community that want to contribute and want to support, and so they get involved and be able to support. I mean, one example here is the harp community. So there are a lot of these extensions for MuseScore that are specific to harp, because a very passionate group within the harp community got involved and said, hey, you know, we want to make this into the best software and channel and everything for harp, and so they put it all together. And so now there's all these great harp pedaling and techniques and all these things that are supported now in MuseScore.
Very cool. There's some other things that I'm excited about too. I've noticed recently, I've downloaded the portable apps. I tried them on iOS, and I also tried them on a Kindle as well. Where's MuseScore sort of going with the portable apps, and why is that important?
Sure. Well, a couple things. The first thing is we are currently in development with all new applications for iOS and for Android. This is the SongBook, the MuseScore SongBook app. And when you pull it up, you're not going to see too much that's too different. You know, you're not going to see a lot of new features or a lot of new looks, but everything under the hood is built completely from zero. And what that's going to allow us to do is move forward very, very quickly to continue to develop new features or new functionality or new experiences on the mobile side. And this is one thing that MuseScore has benefited also from UG, in that, you know, now a new dedicated mobile team that's working full time on these apps, and also bringing their expertise and the insight from Ultimate Guitar in building these mobile apps, not building them, scaling them. The Ultimate Guitar app is probably the number one music app in every country around the world. So they have incredible experience in terms of being able to develop these applications that will scale. So if you look at MuseScore.com, and if you look at the mobile apps, everything has really been about updating the infrastructure and using common tools and resources that have been proven and known to scale to the levels that Ultimate Guitar has done. And so, again, we're focused on the infrastructure to be able to quickly adapt in the future.
And from my experience, the overall user experience is seamless from iOS to Android to Kindle. It's all the same experience, and I really like that. I don't like it when app developers, you know, give certain features to iOS or certain features to Android. It's all there for everybody. So I think that was really cool too. there was another project that, I mean, I dove sort of deep into it this weekend and learned more about the project itself. The Open Score project, crowdsourcing digital scores and creating audio of great works. Let's talk about that a little bit. I think that's such an awesome project.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really it's a fantastic project. It's one that MuseScore has been actively spearheading. It's fantastic that there are other additional partners that have been able to be involved in it. So this is not let's say a MuseScore effort alone, but MuseScore has certainly been taking the lead in the format of these is in the MuseScore format. The idea is that taking all these public domain works out there, the most famous works available, and making high quality editions of these available for everyone. I mean, when we're talking about the level of quality of these editions, that they are getting the depth and support of the engraving that a major publisher would, that there are experts or musicologists that have knowledge in the way that things should be described or things should be notated involved there to be able to create the editions, again, on the level that what a major publisher would be producing, but make those available for free.
I guess my question is MuseScore working with specific composers, or is this again community based?
The way the project works is there's a hit list or a target list of pieces that are submitted and then voted on by the community according to then the priority of how each of these pieces, they use the term liberated which pieces should be liberated and in what order of priority, and it's completely open for anybody to submit and to participate, and this is a great, this is another great initiative that people can participate in if they're passionate about music, but not necessarily maybe their skills or their expertise are not necessarily in the technology area, but maybe more on the side of the expertise in music or musicology, to be able to provide their insights and experience to the project.
And we're talking great works here. We're talking Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and all those, and probably more.
Absolutely. I mean, there's full symphonies available of Beethoven, of Tchaikovsky. These are real serious major works, and it's a really exciting project. I mean, the idea of being able to take and create such a high quality library of these works, particularly things that are out of print or things that are not so easily accessible in some parts of the world, to be able to make them available to all. And I'm thinking about the impact that project has on education. And you look at the idea of being able to have access to such high quality editions regardless of economic ability.
And I'm thinking of local youth orchestras. They could use this music. I'm thinking of professional groups that could use this music. And you're right. The whole making this music accessible to everyone. And what really impresses me is the fact that there are Braille editions included too. So it really is making things accessible.
Absolutely. I mean, the Braille project is fantastic, and this really goes back to the idea with MuseScore about accessibility. And accessibility does not only mean about cost. It does not only mean about geography. It means about, being accessible to every person possible. And I mean, MuseScore has this idea here, this huge philosophy, that's driving. Well, it's MuseScore and UG as a whole, as a company, is this grand vision of 1 billion musicians in the world. And what do we need to do to be able to support the idea of 1 billion musicians in the world? And what does that mean? That's what's driving, let's say, the underlying philosophy of the company. And that means making music truly accessible to everyone. And
so and we've talked quite a bit about that today. And that is, I can't say enough words in the right way to express how important that is as a musician and a teacher and just a professional in the industry. where is MuseScore headed? We've got all of these projects that are sort of in full outright mode right now, and there's a lot of great projects. What's coming down the line? I know there's a MuseScore beta right now. You mentioned MuseScore 3 coming down the pipe in a few months. Where is MuseScore headed over the next few years?
Sure. Well, let's talk first about what's happening in the nearest future. We will soon, and by soon I mean within a matter of a few weeks, be releasing MuseScore 2.3. And MuseScore 2.3, the focus of this release is really expanding a lot of capabilities for percussion, particularly percussion notation. So we're adding a lot of new note heads. We're adding a lot of new articulations and a lot of new things that have really been, let's say, missing from previous releases of MuseScore for percussion. And percussion is kind of it's a wild west in terms of notation. So there's not been a lot of really hard and fast standards for notation that are available for other types of instrumentation. So along with this, we're developing two other things. The first thing is to be able to have a set of notation standards for percussion. And the idea of, saying what is MuseScore? We kind of think about, well, is it the software or is it the ability to distribute? And it's kind of both. We kind of need to look at this holistically. And so in some ways we are a publisher. And so as a, let's say, community-generated publisher, we need to be able to provide resources to the community that would be similar to what publishers would use in-house. So using a consistent and common publishing notation standard for percussion. And so that's one thing that we're going to be making available soon, is this new percussion notation standard that will allow anyone writing scores or creating for percussion to have it be consistent, not only consistently displayed, but consistently notated from score to score, from person to person. And this idea, I think we feel helps, starting first with the performer. I mean, a performer in percussion now sees a consistent view of the way that things are displayed. As a publisher, when people are publishing things to MuseScore, we know that they're going to consistently be displayed in terms of the way things should look. And as a composer, by educating these composers and arrangers and helping them improve the way that they're doing percussion notation, again, it loops back and feeds into those other two things.
I think that's a perfect area to start in, because as someone who writes music often, I've always had trouble wrapping my head around how to write percussion parts in music notation software, and I get there eventually, but having, like you said, a set of standards, I think, is really awesome.
It's great. I mean, and this is actually what I've been personally working on the last little bit, and so this is something I've been really focused on driving. Is this percussion notation standard. And so it will not only be the standard for notation, but the standard for engraving. So we give people guidelines and new templates that are based upon these. So things will come out looking really great, and with a consistent approach. The area that we're focused on, like I said, the newest part of percussion, which is marching percussion, which is the one that is more of the Wild West than anything. And combined with that, we are also creating what's called MuseScore Drumline. And MuseScore Drumline is a new virtual instrument pack, so a new set of sound fonts that are for marching percussion instruments. So we went into a recording studio in Los Angeles with some really high-level marching percussionists, record samples of all this. We have a really great virtual instrument designer, Chris Collins, who has been taking those samples and putting those into a virtual instrument that's all compatible with this notation standard and these new templates. And so we're doing this, and we're focusing on this area for a couple of reasons, in terms of this is part of that education strategy, and this is an area where we can support this and make it available free for music education, to where pretty much every school out there, they have their band programs, and we're looking at how we can start in this first way to look at how we can support them.
That's we sort of touched on a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about myself, as somebody who uses MuseScore. You're talking about recording sound fonts, and I noticed a big difference between MuseScore 1 and MuseScore 2 as far as the sound quality goes of the instruments and everything like that. Are there plugins available, or is there more coming down the line in the future of getting like the realistic instrument sounds and stuff like that? I mean, they sound pretty good now. Is there improvements coming in the future?
Yeah, so let's talk just briefly about how it's been done previously, where it's going, what's happening right now. So MuseScore has previously been focused really on an application to create amazing notation. Right, it's all about the notation. And playback has been something that they've been developing and continuing to develop. The way the sound fonts were created to date were created as a community effort. So it was from the open source community. People would contribute different samples that they would make available as license for the community, and it was built by the community in the same way that the software was. There would be a pull request. Someone would request to make a change. They would add a change and then and put it back. Since the changes here with the company and the new resources that are available, we've been taking the approach of creating a new sound font or new sound fonts from zero that are professionally created by virtual instrument designers. And some of the sound fonts, the samples for the sound fonts we are recording ourselves. Some we're licensing and so on to be able to create a more consistent playback experience. So the first is on the sample recording. The second is the virtual instrument design, and both of those are now professional. We made some, let's say, modest updates in MuseScore 2.2. So 2.2 and 2.1 have an updated sound font, which is MuseScore General, and that is in the SF3 format, which is a derivative of the SF2. So that's what's been currently available. So this base level general sound font, and we're going to continue to improve that over time. You should hear in 2.2 updated piano sounds. Those are some things that you will hear some significant differences in pianos and several other instruments. But as we move forward, we will continue to move through all different instruments. But what's happening in 2.3, not only are we introducing very specific sets or sound font sets for specific instruments, we are introducing them in the SFZ format. And so the SFZ format, anyone out there that's familiar with the ARIA engine or Garriton instruments, those are all in the SFZ format. And so there's a much, much wider range of expression and articulation and everything that's available. And so we're moving forward in producing that. And 2.3, we've added a lot of features into the MuseScore synthesizer to be able to support a much, much, much wider range of capabilities for the SFZ format. So what this means is that not only can you utilize the capabilities of the new MuseScore sound fonts, they're like a MuseScore drumline, you can utilize the capabilities of a wider range of SFZ sound fonts that are available in the market. So that's that piece. In addition to that, MuseScore 2.2 introduced MIDI out. So you have the ability to have VST support. So you can...
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so you can use contact instruments, for example, or to be able to connect with other types of software for sample triggering. Like, for example, I did a project, sort of an experiment recently, taking a score of Peter and the Wolf and playing it back in MuseScore connected to main stage 3, which triggered the samples of narration that were being pulled up as WAV files or MP3 files in main stage.
That's blown my mind that every single thing we've talked about today, the questions that I've had or questions other music teachers have had, there's projects in the works and that's impressive. That much thought had been put into everything. Can you give us a sneak peek about MuseScore 3? What we should expect with that?
Sure. Things you should expect, of course, are expanded support for MIDI out. A lot more flexibility in layout, auto layout kind of functionality. And the cool thing is here is what's different because it's the open source community. I don't have to tell you all the features and great things that are coming, you can go and download it now. So if you want to check out MuseScore 3.0 and where it currently is in progress, go to musescore.org, go to downloads, and then just click on the pre-release, the unsupported or pre-release builds, and you can test drive it and give us. And the great thing is, give us your feedback on what you'd like to see changed, adjusted, improved back in the MuseScore forums, and that's how we can continue to make and improve the experience of MuseScore.
That's one of my favorite things about open source is the ability that you don't have to wait till the release day. You don't have to wait for that specific day. You can get involved with the project on your own and test it out, and be aware that there probably are issues with the latest release that need to be ironed out, and that's what you all need is people to test drive it and find these things before the release.
Absolutely. And then the great thing is that if you have an idea of saying, oh, what if it does this? And that's the great thing. You say, oh, what if it is? Then you go in and make a feature request. If you find that if there's something you say, oh, well, this doesn't behave as I think it should, well, tell us how you think it should. Go back into the forum. Tell us.
Let me ask you this. Okay, so you've obviously sold me on MuseScore, and I'm sure there's many people out there that use it. Let's talk about the people. We're all creatures of habit. There are many music teachers out there. They have their system, their setup. They have, they may have, your competitors as a pre-installed in their school. What would be, in your mind, a way to convince those educators to change their flow and go with something like MuseScore?
Well, talking from my own experience. So I'll tell you, I've been for a number of years a strong user and supporter of Sibelius and of Finale, and I continue to be, even though that I'm in MuseScore. I mean, it's the same, going to a game and wanting to cheer for every team, right? That's that. But we're different. We serve different audience. And we serve, at least for now, and we want to be able to have ways that we can support the educators, that maybe some other players currently don't have. And when we talk about this thing as what is MuseScore, MuseScore is not only about the software, it's about the content, and it's about the community. When I look at the opportunity for teachers, in just kind of saying where, with the education strategy, where we want to go with this, and what's different about MuseScore is not only that it's freely accessible, that your students can be using the same software that you use, and there are no barriers, right? There's no cost, there's no parents you have to convince, there's no district purchasing you have to go through. It's just there. You want it, it's there. So you can be using the same thing that every single one of your students can be using. And the next part of that is there's content that is freely available, right? You can go to MuseScore.com, anything that's out there, and find and download it. And this goes to the next thing, which is the community. And what we've been seeing, which has been slowly developing, and that we want to really, aggressively get behind, is the ability of the community where educators are creating and sharing with other educators different types of lesson plans and worksheets and all types of things. I mean, there's so many. If you go to MuseScore.com and search for worksheet or search for theory, there's so many music theory worksheets and even music history and music listening worksheets that are available from the community. And we want to help that community to be able to organize and grow. And what's interesting about, if you go to MuseScore.com and you click on community, you can go and create a community about anything. So if you want to go and create a community of, let's say you're a teacher out there dealing with ORF instruments, and you want to create a community where people can go and talk about, as a teacher, creating things for ORF instruments, and you want to have notation out there for ORF instruments, well, you can go and do that and publish the worksheets and publish the sheet music and have all the discussions around there to be able to support other teachers, right? And so I think that the community aspect and the content are the things that are going to be some of the most valuable things for educators moving forward.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it's not just about the music notation; it's the whole community vibe that you guys are bringing. And excuse me. Last thing, you're supporting music educators, and I can't thank you enough for coming on to the show today and talking to a music educator and tossing around ideas. And how can, say, music educators or anybody else in there who's interested in helping an open source project, how can we support you?
Sure. I mean, the best way to get involved in supporting MuseScore, or the first part, is to just simply download the software, use it, see how it works, what it is that maybe you say you have an idea of how we can improve something, an idea how something can change. As I said before, dive into the forums, ask the question. The second way to do this is, there's again all the areas we talked about documentation before, and all the areas that are not necessarily relating to code, but can be able to be involved in creating all the support materials for this. The third thing, be involved in the community. That could be getting involved in the community from the developer side. It could be involved in getting the community involved in the community from the side of MuseScore.com, engaging in the community or creating a community for whatever it is that you're passionate and involved in music. We want to be a part of that. We want to be able to support that. And so jumping in, and let's say just like the harp community, being able to create their community, identifying their needs, communicating their needs to us and to the community as a whole, to be able to support that. And so those are some of the best ways to get involved on that side, as well as creating content that you want to freely share with others, so that you may be able to access content that others freely create.
That's incredible, and thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time coming on here, talking about MuseScore and what it's all about. I wish that I can help you out in the future again. So please keep in touch with any updates. Feel free to send me any information on MuseScore, and I'll keep adding them to the show from time to time. If I can do anything to help you out, I would be right there and willing to do that for you. So I think we're going to wrap things up. And thanks so much for coming on the show today. I hope you had a good time on the show. And if you are a listener and you want to subscribe to our RSS feed, you can get our shows downloaded right to your device. If you have questions, comments, feedback, whether it's in regards to this show and MuseScore, you can send me an email, mrptechreviews@gmail.com. And if you have comments regarding MuseScore, I'll forward them on. And if you got comments on other shows, you can also send that as well. I definitely appreciate everybody who joined us in Discord today, asking the questions today. So I'm just going to say to everybody, thanks so much for listening. I guess we'll see you next time, guys.